Good afternoon. Welcome to Kansas City, Kansas Public Library, and let's welcome our guest speaker today, Marisa Gonzalez of Marisa Gonzalez Studios, LLC. Marisa will teach us about website design strategies for nonprofits and small businesses. Marisa?
Thank you, Ellen. I appreciate it. So, thank you to everyone that came. Uh, First of all, I want to say thank you for your time. I hope to make your experience worthwhile to help you captivate your and convert your website viewers and to increase your reach. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself before we go any further. So I was born in Kansas City to two Mexican American parents and raised in a Caucasian community. I was among a handful of kids who had brown or black skin in our schools. To my friends at school, I was Mexican, but to my extended family, like my cousins, etc., who grew up in Kansas City, I was perceived as Caucasian. I didn't speak Spanish, so uh, that feeling of belonging was never quite there in either situation. So my Chicana culture puts my feet on both sides of an invisible line that I walk daily. I hold my customs and culture close to my heart and mouth, as I'm sure you do as well with your culture. This lived this lived perspective has helped me to use my talents in education. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Graphic Design to design with many considerations, but most of all to use website design to increase visual reach, improve access, and to help us feel connected in the digital world. You may or may not know the Latin culture speaks many languages, has different types of music to get us moving, and has different colors on our flags to represent our homeland. And it has a variety of spices we use in our cuisines that make us feel at home. Everything I just mentioned made each of us feel our own particular cultural traditions. So what does this have to do with websites? Well, when you're designing a website, you have to think about what you want your customer or your target audience to feel. So are you trying to get them excited? Are you trying to help them feel calm and peaceful? Or do you want them to click around and scroll down for engagement? So just like the sounds, smells, and tastes of my Latin culture provoke feelings within me, you want your website and visual representation to provoke feelings in your potential customers. So in 2025, there were over 5 billion internet users worldwide, according to Data Reportal. In 2024, the internet housed about 1 billion websites, according to Forbes. In addition, 41 to 55% of website visitors leave a website, or they also called bounce, after visiting only one page due to a lack of relevant or engaging content, difficulty in navigation, or other factors that detract from the user experience. As a result, 88% of online users won't return to a site after a bad experience, resulting in lost opportunities and engagement, um, as well as repeat visitors. This shows the importance of providing a smooth and user-friendly website for users. In fact, not having a responsive design is rated as one of the top reasons visitors might leave a website. Other reasons can be seen on this slide. So designing your website with accessibility in mind is not only a legal obligation and the right thing to do, but it's also a good for your website business performance. Here are some of the most important reasons why you should make your website accessible. One is for ethical reasons. Two is for legal compliance. In some states and countries, they require your website to be website accessible. Three, enhanced brand reputation. Four, access to a larger market. And five, improved SEO and user experience. So today we will spend this session discussing the following objectives. One, identify colors and images for visual impact. Two, identify font selection for visual appeal. Three, identify web optimization for screen size. and languages. Also, the information I provide in this session is a high-level overview of website design and accessibility. There is so much more information that is involved, but I can't cover it all in this short session. Feel free to reach out to me if you feel like you need more information or want help with your website. I want to give you a good foundation to begin. So before we go any further, I want this session to be as interactive as possible. I will be asking for your input on various slides. So if you have any questions, please keep them in mind for the Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. So first, let's talk about color and imagery. So color has such an impact on our everyday lives without us even knowing it. For example, we all know green means go and red means stop when we're driving. Did you also know that green means nature or health? That's why you see many healthcare providers have this color in their office or even in their logo to subconsciously communicate these traits. Another great example is red. It is shown to be appetizing, which is why it is used a lot in restaurants, particularly fast food. Think you want to think about, those eye-catching signs that you see far away from the highway, they're usually red or bright colors. There's a popular fast food chain, I won't mention their name, but they did a lot of research in color psychology to choose their brand colors of red, which triggers appetite, and yellow, it triggers happiness and friendliness. When you put these two colors together, it's about speed or fast food. In other words, you need to know what your audience wants to feel when you're designing a website or visual brand. Colors carry deep meanings with them in every culture. Western, Far Eastern, Middle Eastern, Indian, and African cultures have stark differences in the symbolism of colors within their cultures. So, for instance, in some cultures, white represents innocence, but in other cultures, it can represent death. So, we're going to move on to a slide here that I'm going to you to really look closely at the images. We're first going to focus on A and C. So, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about these two. Do photos A or C work best to make the healthy food option more appetizing? And why do you think that is? So if you want to, you can say it out loud, or that way you can let me know what you think. And then if I don't hear anything after like 10 seconds or so, I can, give you my feedback or what I think.
I think it's A.
What do you think that?
It's colorful. It looks something that I want to eat. It
Yeah.
has variety in the plate.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, that's exactly what I think too. I mean, that those colors in themselves, I mean, it makes it so appetizing. And then you want to look at the photo and the way it's laid out. That's a great stylized photo. Not to say that the photo in C is not a good stylized photo, but it's obviously not as colorful. It's kind of just a really neutral color, so it doesn't really, it's not as appetizing as the one in A. So thank you for saying something, Olga. So I'm going to now can have you compare the two photos with B and D. So they're obviously, kind of health related. They have like that, the blues here. That's also kind of health related, but also blue can create like that feeling of trust. It's that subconscious color feeling that way. So if we look at these two photos, what do you think of these two photos? Like, do you think is the better one of the two, B or D?
B, of course. Yes, it's
Right.
clear. You can see what's happening.
Exactly. Yes. So the reason I put this on here, because a lot of people, whenever they're choosing photos, it's very important that you're choosing the right photo for your particular website and for your target audience. So like for this particular picture, I chose it because, again, it's health related, but you could think like it's an occupational therapy or physical therapy clinic or something to that effect. So you already know that when you're getting on the site, what they do. one, but then two, you want to have great quality photos because if you're going to a website and the photo looks like this, you're going to be like, you're not going to think they're as professional as the one as you think that you would be going to for this particular one. So like the lower quality photo just kind of takes away from that business's reputation a little bit, even just by the photo, because it's not as clear as the one in B. Also, you want to consider whenever you're looking at photos is like this photo would be perfect for like on a blog. If you have, the words right next to it or something like that, you don't want it to be so big. But if you're looking at this smaller photo, obviously you're not going to want to fill up your screen on your website because it is going to create this pixelation. And that's really what happens is when you're using a small photo and you try to blow it up to a size that shouldn't really be that size, what you're doing is you're causing the pixels in the photo, which are these little squares, you're causing them to spread out. And that's what you're seeing here is it's called pixelation. So it's the pixel ratio becomes unequal and it creates that look of, like I said, pixelation. So when you're looking at photos for your website, you want to make sure they're the right size for your website. You don't want to, like I said, you don't want to have a small photo that you're trying to blow up to fill up your screen and then it's going to create this. But also you don't want to have a huge photo and then try to size it down because it's going to cause your website to work that much harder to size it down and also have a fast loading speed. So you want to consider that as well. Like you don't want to have a large photo for a small area because it will cause your site, like I said, to slow down because it's trying to compress that image just to load your site. So we're going to move on to this website. This is an actual website that I found on another website, and they post challenging websites, basically that you can look at and kind of critique in your own way. So I'm going to ask you some questions about this website. Does this site have any white space? First, so what do you think of the color choices, and what do you think of the image choices?
Too many colors. And yeah.
Yeah, that was the first thing you saw?
You can't, yeah, the colors. Can barely read
Yeah.
the letters.
Right, exactly. So first let me talk about the white space. So white space is also called negative space. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a literal white. It just means that there's an area there that is not filled with like a picture or something. So I guess like the closest thing would be here is like this little green area that's right on the border. It's barely any white space, or which is also called negative space. But you can see it's right here. Like I said, very little white space or negative space here. So that's one thing you want to make sure you have on your website is white space because it really does help your eye flow better. Whenever it's everything is like filled to the brim here, like you can see on this website, it makes it like very overwhelming to your brain and to your eyes just to to process everything. You're trying to take everything in, and it like I said, it becomes very overwhelming. For the colors and everything like that, I mean, like Olga said, like yeah, it is. There's way too many colors, and again, it makes it very overwhelming. So let's first talk about just real quick the image. I don't really understand why they have this coin here, if there's a significance to this particular owner. This is a daycare website, by the way. So I'm not really sure why they have that on there. But either way, I don't really see it as a good option for this website. The other thing is, I mean, yes, they have a baby in here, which is great. Because it is a daycare website. But at the same time, I don't understand why they have this empty. I mean, this is a little bit of white space there, but it's just an empty bubble that they should have filled, or maybe the person that I got the website from, maybe they covered it up because it showed the company's name. I'm not sure, but either way, I hope it was something was in there because if it wasn't, it's just pointless to put that there. But then like going to the colors, you kind of want to stick with one, with a few colors for your brand. You don't want to have it like all over like this. I mean, I know, yes, that children are attracted to a lot of colors, but if this is targeting parents, we don't necessarily need all these colors to separate out the different information. They could have laid this out differently. Um, Another thing I want to say about the colors is you want to be careful about putting like white with a background on it, as far as like, because this might be challenging to see with the pink background and the white text. And also with orange, that can also be a problem too. So you just really want to be careful of what text color you're putting with the background, because it can make it really hard to see as far as for contrast. And not only for low vision people, but also just for people who have, regular vision, if you will, or normal vision. You want to really make sure you're being careful with what colors you're putting against what other colors as far as text and all that type of stuff. The other thing was with this website is they use all caps with this. So it makes it really hard. Like, I mean, what I learned whenever I'm, a while back, when you're using all caps, it's like they're yelling at you. So, I wouldn't think that this site wants to have where the whole thing, they're yelling at you to tell you this information. So you really want to be careful about not using all caps. You can use all caps. It's not a bad thing, but it's it can be very overwhelming, and especially with all caps, it makes it very hard to read, and it makes it really it's a struggle on your brain and your eyes to see all of that information. So you really need to make sure that you are if you're using all caps, maybe just have it for a short header, and then the rest of it can be like a normal, uppercase, lowercase type of situation. But really it should be used sparingly when you're using all caps, just because, like I said, it makes it so hard to read. Okay, let me go to the next slide. So this slide obviously is, this website is completely different. It's black and white. So what's the first thing you notice about this website? Do you see like, did you see the logo first, or do you see the image first? And
The
there's no
image.
wrong answer.
The image.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Image.
The image. Yeah. So, yeah, because it's the biggest thing on the page, right? So this is a perfect example of white or negative space. Again, it doesn't the negative space does not have to be white, but just the way that this was designed, it was designed really well because it has a lot more white space. So it allows your eye to like flow around it, and it doesn't feel like it's so overwhelming like the other one. So so don't be afraid of white space. I know my art teacher back in school would always say that. Oh, and I know when I'm designing a site or something else, I always hear his voice in my head when I think like, should I add more? And then I'll hear his voice and be like, okay, I'll leave it. So you don't have to use color to create impact. Sometimes black and white design choices are best based on your audience and what you want your audience to focus on. So for this website, you're focusing on the image, obviously, because it's the largest image or largest piece on this particular website at this point, and possibly the logo, because it's right there. It's the next biggest thing. So I would say the only negative thing I would say about this website is the image itself. It is a nice image, but there's not a lot of contrast to it. So it is kind of flat. So it makes it where you can't see the end of the building and where the statue starts. That would be the only negative I see with it. I do like that they put on the bottom, they have in this area, they have like the white text that gives it a great amount of contrast, and the same thing up here, the black against the white, it gives a great amount of contrast. And see, they use all caps right here, and that's okay because the words are short. It's not like you're reading like a whole paragraph, so it is okay to use all caps. You just don't want to use it as much. But otherwise, this website is a overall a great design. I do want to say is another thing before I forget is when you're looking at this particular site or even the other ones that I'm going to show, that we're going to pretend that this is the bottom of the screen, this line right here, and and then this is the top of the screen. So this is anything above this area is called above the fold. So when you're designing your website, you want to make sure that you have the most important information, I guess you could say, at the top or above the fold before anybody scrolls down. So if you're going to have like your call to action button of, purchase this or whatever, you kind of want to have like, you'll see a lot of people, even including myself, you'll have the call to action button up here, or sometimes they'll have it down here below the image. But you just want to make sure you have probably the most important information above the fold here before anybody scrolls. And it's going to be different too on a mobile device. So you'll have to look at that and how it looks before you scroll on the mobile as well. So, but for this particular situation, this is a desktop view. You just want to consider that when you're looking at a website or when you're designing a website. So this is another website, and this is going to be the last one we look at for this particular thing, or this particular case study. So what challenges do you see here? Is it the copy easy to read? What do you think of the image?
It's not easy to read. It's the white, yeah, the background. You can see the white letters.
Right. Yeah. So exactly. Like when you're designing a website as well, you want to make sure like this is a great photo overall. I mean, there are some challenges to it that I will point out, but you want to really consider like what kind of image you're putting on your website if you're going to have text in the foreground. Like this, like I said, this photo is a great photo in some ways, but it's not good for the way it's used here because the text or the header copy gets lost lost within the photo itself because it has these white spaces between the trees. And even the call to action button here, it says, something more, I think probably find out more or something. It's really hard to see too. So, what I would recommend if you're going to have this kind of photo, like, it's a beautiful photo as I'm like, it's very flowing and there's a lot of movement, but I would have put like this darker background behind the white text. So it makes it gives it more contrast. So you can see right here, it's darker right here. And so the text is easier to see and, to read in general. Whereas here, it's like I said, it gets lost. So if you're going to put a photo back there, you want to consider, make it darker in the background. If you're going to put white text, like I said, white text can be really tricky. I mean, even for myself, it can be really tricky. So you just need to make sure that you're allowing enough contrast that you're communicating, your message well with enough contrast for, for the foreground and the background. I know here they try to put like like a transparency here but it's basically white on white. So it sort of helped make it, where you can see, what it says here, but it's still pretty challenging. So I would say like the best part of this site is having this dark part there, and then with the white text in the foreground for this menu or for the navigation here. So one other thing is too for this, maybe they are wanting the photo to be showing, like I said, the dancing, that type of thing. But the thing that I feel like detracts from it is the dancer is so far up on towards the menu. I feel like she's falling off the screen. So I would have maybe, if they were able to, I don't know, whoever took this photo, if there was enough space for maybe them to move down the photo. So the dancer is like pointing to the menu instead of being through the menu and like I said, almost coming off the screen. So that's just another thing, another consideration when you're choosing photos for your website. So for we're going to do a case study based on for color. Uh, we're going to just focus on teal for this particular example. So we're gonna say let's since we're focusing on teal, we're going to say your target audience loves teal. So we're going to focus on the hue here of teal and see how it gets darker and how you can use that on your website. So teal is a revitalizing and rejuvenating color that also represents open communication and clarity of thought. So you may see this color on wellness websites. So some questions here with in regards to these colors. If you want to use teal, are you going to make the background of your website teal, or are some of the fonts or buttons going to be light or dark colors? You know, one other question I have is, are you going to make the background dark, or are you going to make the background teal and then have a black or dark colored fonts for your website? So what do you think is your best choice, if any of them? And I know I kind of went through that kind of fast, so if it's unknown, it's okay. But
So I need to pick one, like which one better?
Yes,
I think the last one at the bottom.
yeah, it definitely shows up a lot better. Thank you. So if you don't want to be limited by the dark font, you need to choose. You need to choose your colors well, so that way you're not limited by the foreground font that you're putting in, in on your website. So you could also, if you wanted to, you could have this as the background of your website, or you could just say that these are like call to action or CTA buttons. So you could have it either way, but either way, you still need to consider like the colors you're using in the foreground. So the hue here, as you can see, the white gets lost, the white text gets lost, the gray shows up pretty well, and so does the black. And it's going to be like this all the way down. There's black, gray, and white. And then as you can see, as the tint you have, which is tint is white, is added to the color. The white text, gets lost. The book now it's basically lost within the background. But the black and the gray shows up well. The tone where you have gray added, it's, everything shows up well. The gray gets kind of lost a little bit, not too bad, but I mean, it doesn't necessarily pop though either. So for like the shade where you have black added, the black pops a lot. Where, I mean, I guess it pops pretty well on here on the tone. But definitely with the shade, you have the black and the white that pop the most. So you're not only wanting to bring attention to just your regular user, but you need to also consider the contrast for people who have low vision. So considerations for accessibility, as you need to keep in mind, visual accessibility for people who can't see varying degrees of color. So like people with macular degeneration or those with color blindness, and they need a high contrast to read what's on your website. So you may have your target audience of, they have, they're young and, they have great vision or whatever, but you also have to think about the other people that may be coming to your site who may not have that clear vision. So I designed this website. We're going to apply what we just learned from the last slide. We're going to apply it here. And this is just a mock-up. This is not a real website. But for this case, we're going to use gray as the background for this lower part of the screen. And again, this is all above the fold. So for the shade, I used, and then again, that's black added. I used that for the contact of the teal for this particular call to action button. And then for the book now and the welcome, I used the hue, which was the lightest or the second to lightest color on the last slide. I used that here for the background of the book now and the welcome to Wellness Studio. So I applied it where I needed to as far as to allow that the best contrast as I possibly could for the colors that are in that I chose for my color palette. So just FYI, the color variants show differently on various screens or monitors. So when you're designing your site, yes, look at your particular screen, but another screen, you need to look at other ones if possible because it's going to show up differently. I know for myself, I have two screens here, and the one I'm talking to you right now, it shows up completely different than my laptop. So that is one thing to consider is just don't think that it since it shows up perfectly on your screen that it's going to show up perfectly on someone else's. So for this one, I changed the colors just on the bottom here, and I applied the darkest teal, which is the shade, which is black added to this particular color area. So I'm using the hue for which is the dominant color for the book now. And then I'm using, for the contact, I used the same color. I'm sorry, I used black text. And then I also put a black border around it again to create that contrast. I didn't necessarily have to do that, but someone who is on my website may not be able to see where the white ends and the teal starts. So by adding that black border around the call to action button, it does give that pop of color one, and it also creates a contrast that I'm looking for. So as you can see, using a strategic font, style, and color contrast helps to engage your wider audience and keep them engaged with your website. I know that this can be very detailed and overwhelming, which is why I include color and contrast choices, website choices when I'm working with my clients. So one thing I do want to point out is that the color choices for the call to action and for the call to action buttons for the book now and for the contact, they look like this one looks thinner than this one over here, but they're the exact same fonts and they're exact same weight. So there's nothing different about them. They're exactly the same, but with that background behind it, it makes it look a little bit different. So just that's another consideration to kind of what I was saying for the color on the daycare site. Colors will show up differently with that background and then the text in the foreground. So we are going to be talking more about contrast in the next slide. I'm sorry, fonts in the next slide. So size does matter here. So many people do use smaller fonts because they think it looks more stylish and less overpowering to the website. However, not all people can see the smaller size fonts, such as 7.5 to 9-point size. So you may not know that the optimal font size in an email is about 12 points, which is a minimum of 16 pixels. That's great for general email reading. You want it large enough to be read on desktop and mobile devices, but not so big that it comes across as shouting. So the optimal font size for accessibility is 12 to 14 point. But for your the font though for your website, I'm sorry. So the optimal font size range for accessibility is 12 to 14 point. Your font should be suitable for scanning and skimming on screens of all sizes, which is desktop, mobile, and tablets. In comparison, the optimal size text for a website is 14 to 18. So right here to right there. Or it needs to be bold. So as you can see, like these are the exact same font, but I bolded it on this one. So it really does make it clearer to see versus the regular font here. It's kind of what I was saying before with all caps. Yes, it's good to use bold, but you don't want to have bold throughout your website because then you are using an actual bold font, so to speak. It doesn't show up as much or doesn't bring your attention to that particular area because everything's bolded. So you just need to really be careful about bolding your fonts throughout the site. You don't want to do that. So as far as font size, ensuring that text can be expanded up to 200% on websites is the best way to know if it can be accessible. So we're going to look at hierarchy now and why font matters so much. So not only does the wrong font size add frustration to a website experience, but it results in a decrease in conversions and session duration, also known as bounce rates. There have been several studies that show the effect of font sizes on people's reading ability and how age plays a factor as well. So different font sizes create a hierarchy of largest to smallest. Creating a hierarchy helps the eye know where to go in a layout, deciding what is more important or not as important. So generally speaking, you want to have your header as the biggest part of, on your website. So right here, you can see it on the phone. Same thing for here. The title, it's the biggest font throughout this section. And then the subheaders, really for this particular example, they don't really have it as not, if it's this one at the subheaders that are bolder, if they're bigger, it's negligible as far as compared to the regular font size or the body copy, but it's still, they bring your eye to this part because, or by bolding it, because it does make that difference between that section and the body copy. So yeah, they may not have changed the size, the point size on this, but by bolding it, it still gives that effect of, okay, this is the next section you need to look at, or this is where your eye needs to go next. So you want to have the subheaders be, generally speaking, like a medium size font compared to the biggest size font of the header. And then for the body copy, you want it to be a regular smaller size. Obviously, you don't want to have it too small, but you want it to be smaller than the rest again, versus the header and the subheader. So here's the header right here, the subheader, the A-list rock, and then the body copy, so to speak, or really this may be even a subheader too, of our editors select the best. But even then, it's still not as bold as the text above it. So now let's talk about style choices. A lot of people want to go with the fancy or script typefaces that look interesting but are difficult to read at times. You want to consider the context in which you're using a font. For example, I'm going to have you look at this particular font. Do you know what the first letter is right out of the gate?
Yeah.
What is it?
Um,
And it's okay to be wrong because, it's fine.
so what
Nothing wrong
was the
with it.
question?
What is the first letter here? Can you tell what the
G.
first letter is and
G.
what?
G.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was great. Yeah, because this is called Great Vibes. So the font, yeah, is called Great Vibes. So you can tell that it's a G, but to someone else, it might be like like a weird looking E or a fancy E, or it could be another letter. So you would just want to think about that when you're using a font, that yes, you may be able to know what that letter is. And Olga, what the G is, thankfully, but maybe someone else won't. And that's just another thing you need to consider when you're using different fonts or a script font on a website. So it's kind of like if you have this on a website and you're going to confuse, you're going to confuse people, people are going to leave your website because they don't know what you're talking about. So there's a great direct quote from marketer Paul Goldberg that said, "You confuse them, you lose them." And that's very true. You get on a website and you don't know what, the font says or the text says, or you don't know what that particular business is offering, you're going to leave the site if you can't figure it out in the first like 10 seconds. So yeah, you want to make sure that you're really thinking that too, is you don't want to confuse your audience, because if you do confuse them, you're going to lose them automatically. So custom fonts and fancy symbols make your content harder to read, not just for screen reader users, but also for people with dyslexia, low vision, lower reading levels and abilities, people with learning disabilities or difficulties, limited time or attention span are non-native English speakers. So these types of fonts make it things harder to read for sighted users as well. This is because they add extra visual noise that our brains must work harder to read. So another font that I want us to look at is, so these are serif fonts, and these are sans serif fonts. So Times New Roman is a serif font because it has little tails that come off the end of the text. Whereas if you look at here, these are sans serif fonts, which you can tell there's no tail on any of these particular fonts. So there's nothing wrong with using sans serif, or I'm sorry, serif fonts like Times New Roman, Laura, or E.B. Garamond. However, you want to make sure that you're not using a lot in body copy because it can look really busy and hard to read. Our brains want to skim across a page to read content with ease, and our brains don't want to work that hard to read. So the end result is that your audience will move on if they can't, if it's too overwhelming, if the text is too overwhelming. It's just kind of like the one in the daycare website. So the accented copy here from these particular fonts, they're great to be used, but at the same time, you only want to use them for emphasis and you want to use them sparingly. So websites that are text heavy should have larger fonts for the body copy to create emphasis, impact, and acuity, and to make the reader not feel like they're reading a book. If you want to use a font like Times New Roman or Laura or E.B. Garamond, I would just use them for a header, and you want to make sure that they're not long in length, because this makes it easier on the eyes to read. So I personally like sans serif fonts more than serif fonts. I don't know, for some reason, I think maybe since I've always known Times New Roman on a computer, it's probably the least favorite of my fonts. So I really like Montserrat a lot. It's probably my favorite font, and I use it often. Just because it's a really clean font and there's not a lot to it in it, but it also, it's easy to read. I also liked Railway for a time, but whenever I see this font, I can always tell that it's Railway because of the W. And then Open Sans, same thing. It's a good font, simple font, really clear and easy to read. But there's nothing wrong with any of these fonts, just FYI. So when you're talking about fonts, you want to consider the weight of the font as well. You want to make sure that the weight or the thickness of the font is easy to read. So as you can see for this one, this is a Montserrat Thin 100, which is, a little bit harder to read versus the Montserrat Extra Bold 900. So there are some fonts that will give you the option of having these different weights, but not every font will. Montserrat does, but like I said, it's not every font will. So, having a thin font makes it hard to read. So you want to, opt for like a 400 or 600 weight thickness, because it works better visually, but it also depends on the font itself. Like you wouldn't want to have a 600 weight option for I can't think of another font off the top of my head, and then it looks way too thick and it's really hard to read. So that's just one thing you want to consider. I'd probably go with like this weight 400 for a body copy, and then the 600 for a subheader, and then the Montserrat semi-bold for like a header, or even maybe a different subheader, and then the extra bold for a header. But even then, I probably would not use the extra bold one as much, even for a header. So you also don't want to use the 900 weight font throughout your website either, because then it can be overpowering and negatively affect the feel of the site. So this is, as you can see here, it's kind of what I was saying before, the Montserrat Thin. It's still easy to read, but it kind of can be hard to read. But when you size it down to a 19 point, so this was like 41 point up here, and you size it down to 19 point, it looks a lot harder to read. So that's why it's a font, or the weight you want to kind of avoid as much as possible. It looks good on some things, but overall, to read it easily, it's not the best option. Also, you consider what I was saying before is the font itself, the weight, it's going to look different on a colored background. So that's another thing you need to consider as well. So this is one of my most favorite challenging websites. There's just a lot going on here, and this is an actual website. So, this website, doesn't have any clear direction. This has way too many fonts. You want to have a maximum of 3 fonts on your website. And then the navigation here, the home is at the bottom. I don't know why they put that there, but it's just this site is very challenging. So the chosen typefaces that you choose or the fonts that you choose should have a variety of weights, kind of like I was saying before in the last slide. And then you just want to be strategic in how you're laying it out, which this website is not strategic in any way. Maybe to them, but not to me. So now we're going to talk about optimization, and this is the last thing we'll be talking about. You may think that designing for a desktop or laptop screen is the only layout to consider, but you also want to consider what we use most often when we're looking at websites. We're using our phone, right? So you want to consider how many people are using the phone for convenience, not only for the browsing aspect, but they could also be using a tablet as well. If your website is not designed with smaller screen sizes like our phones or tablets, then your content, like your words or photos, could be getting lost beyond the borders of the screen. We all work on different site screens, so different website platforms have different browser requirements. But for this presentation, I'm going to focus on Google Chrome. For mobility and accessibility, we're going to talk about phones and laptops. There's no one best screen size to design for, but the average resolution sizes in 2024 worldwide for a phone was 360 by 800. For a desktop, it was 1920 by 1080, and that's 23% of the market. And then for tablet, it's 768 by 1024. So we're going to look at this example of a website that was not designed with mobile version in mind. If you look at this website, you see a guy here and then, all of the navigation and their menu up here. But whenever I sized it down to a mobile size, this is all that I see is the guy there. And then and a lot of this text that was over here gets cut off. So there's no navigation on here, or no menu on here. And, you can't even press a button to, for a call to action. So you just really want to make sure that when you're designing a website that you're thinking the mobile version probably foremost in your mind, because that's what everybody is on, versus a desktop. So you design for the mobile version first and then design for the desktop second. So as you can see, the logo is completely gone too. So if you were to go on the site as a mobile version, are you going to think to yourself, is this like a dating website or what is this? So you really, again, need to consider like the look of your site, not only on the desktop, but also on the mobile version. So some content management systems or CMS platforms that I use, some of them will choose for you, but other ones won't. So like if you, I typically use WordPress and Squarespace. So if you're using Squarespace, they already have a preset size that they use on all their websites. And that's not something I can choose or anything like that. It is already there. Whereas WordPress, that's another platform I use, you can basically make it whatever size you want. So there are limitations, but there are also, the part that you don't have to worry about is for Squarespace is you don't have to think about the size. It's already set. So you will look at the overall size of the screens or even the pixel size to determine what's the best choice for your website. You also need to consider the content you plan to put on there and the backend work to create, maintain, or update the website. The best CMS or content management systems out there are WordPress, because it allows you so much flexibility. 2 is Squarespace. 3 is Weebly, which is being phased out by Square to use their builder. And then 4 is Wix. So we're going to talk about accessibility now for color. I'm sorry, we already talked about accessibility for color, font size, and weight. Now we're going to talk about it for optimizing various languages. So if you're not optimizing for various demographics, you're missing another key audience of purchasing power. You could do this on a website where, excuse me, where you have 2 languages side by side. Or another consideration is that some of the population may have literacy issues, so that may cause issues for a screen reader. So here's an example of a website that they had a language choice. So here it's in English, and then when I clicked on this little button here, it translated it to Spanish. So on some platforms like WordPress, they do have plugins. I don't personally use this plugin, but it's, an option there. And some of these plugins can be free or paid. But there's also like browser plugins that you can use. Like, again, I use Chrome. So whenever I go to a website, if it knows that I don't speak Spanish, it will ask me to if it's already in Spanish, it will ask me if I want to translate it to English. And obviously I'm going to say yes. But again, it depends on the website platform you're using, or the browser, I'm sorry, that you're using. Another option is you can design pages for specific languages as well. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, and really it's if you already have your website designed, if you scan this QR code, or there's a bit.ly link right here, or you can go to my website in general, it's on there. You can see why your website is not meeting your goals. You just take, this quiz, and it sends you the results to tell you what you need to work on for your website. It just gives you actionable results to improve your website. And then I have another offering as well. Go to my website and you can download a free website checklist to improve your website too. So again, you have the bit.ly link here, or you can scan the QR code. And you just put in your email address and all that information, and it will send it to you via email, and you can download the PDF. And so if anybody has any questions, please let me know. I'm sorry, it's kind of close to time, but I can stay for a few minutes to answer any questions. So just before I say anything else, I'd like to thank you for coming. I'd like to work with you and get to know your business needs. I do this for a living, and I can help you with your website design and visual brand design. I look forward to connecting with you. And again, thank you so much for your time. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much, Marisa, for the wonderful presentation. Thank you, everybody who attended this wonderful presentation. I'm sure it will be very helpful to a lot of people.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and everybody have a great day.